Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about my journey with self-harm and how it all started, and just speak about what I went through and how I recovered from my self-harm addiction. So let's get right into it. Also, major trigger warning for this video. I'm not going to go too much into detail, but if you are the kind of person who gets triggered very easily, I would recommend not watching this, and I will add some helplines in the description of this video if anyone needs to talk about anything. Okay, so I'm going to start at the very beginning. So when I was 9 years old, I first started suffering with my mental health. It started as OCD. So when I was 9 years old, I had a lot of compulsions and obsessions. I still don't know why I had OCD at that age. I didn't really go through any major trauma or anything. I guess that's just how my brain was. And then I kind of got a little bit better when I moved up to high school. But then I started suffering with anxiety. I had a lot of panic attacks and I just became really anxious. This was over the summer. So when I returned to school, when I was 13 years old, after summer, I was really anxious and the teachers didn't understand. I was having panic attacks and they didn't know how to handle me. They were locking me in rooms and they confiscated things like my phone and all my comfort things like chewing gum, things that helped me not be as anxious. They confiscated everything and they just really didn't understand my anxiety. So that led to me being a little bit naughty at school. I'd say a little bit. I mean, it was kind of a response to the environment I was in, because when I was having panic attacks, I would kind of lash out and then they would punish me. So they would put me into isolation, which is basically where you go into a room for the entire day and you're not allowed to leave apart from lunch. And that's literally it. You're not allowed to see the other students. So I was in isolation a lot and I kind of learnt behaviour from there, from some of the other naughty kids who were in there. And I did kind of become quite naughty. And so I ended up getting excluded from school. So I was really scared because I had never been excluded before and I knew my parents were going to be so mad at me. So when I came home, I just remember I didn't even know I was excluded until I got home. My mum rang me. She was at the supermarket with my dad and they rang me. My mum was like, "You've been excluded." And I was like, "What?" And she was telling me, your dad's furious at you, he's so mad. So I was so scared for when my parents got home because I had been excluded. I knew I was going to get into so much trouble. So when we got home, my dad yelled at me, and you know what parents are like. I got the whole kind of rant about how they didn't raise me that way, to be naughty, and I was so mad because the reason I got excluded was because the teacher had tried to confiscate my phone again and I didn't want them to because I was anxious. I needed my phone if I needed to contact my mum, who was a very, very much my safe person basically. I needed to have my phone in case I had a panic attack so I could contact my mum, and the teacher had tried to confiscate it from me and I said no, and so I got excluded. And so when my parents were yelling at me, I was very hurt because I feel like they didn't properly understand why I was excluded. I feel like they thought I was just being naughty when in actual fact I was just suffering and I just wanted to have my safety items, my comfort items, and they were trying to confiscate it from me. And I was so mad that I grabbed a paperclip, like a paperclip basically, and I bent it and I went like that. Not deep, didn't even break the skin. And I thought, oh, it's fine, it will just go away. And then the next day, when my exclusion was over, I remember going to school and it hadn't gone away, like the marks, and I was scared because I was like, should have gone away by now, like it didn't break the skin, but it still had left like marks. And I told one of my friends, and she told the teacher, and so I had to go and tell the teacher, and show the teacher, and I was literally having a panic attack. I was so scared because I knew that they would then tell my parents and it would be a very big thing, and I did not want that. Anyway, I told the teacher and he told another teacher, and then she told me she would have to ring my parents. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so scared to go home. So I remember on the way home from school, I was trying to like delay my arrival home, and I was walking really slowly and stuff, and I ended up ringing my mum. I was like, has the teacher rang you yet? She was like, no. What have you done? And I was like, I cut my arm. And she was like, she sounded mad. Like my mum sounded mad over the phone. So I did not want to go home. I stayed in the alleyway. There's an alleyway by my house. I stood in that alleyway and I just didn't want to go home. Because basically in my house, like we don't talk about like those kind of things. Like feelings aren't talked about. Because I'm really bad in like uncomfortable conversations, especially when they're like about me. Like no, stresses me out. So when I got home, my nana and granddad were there, and my parents took me into like a separate room and they were like, show us, and I showed them, and they were like, promise you'll never do that again. And I was like, I promise. And then I went back up to my room and I did do it again. I did do it again many, many times. And I'm going to get into that. But that was kind of the start of my journey with self-harm. After that day, I didn't self-harm for a few weeks, and then I got into trouble again. And then I kept getting into trouble, and every time I got into trouble at school, I would self-harm with paper clips, like literal paper clips that were bent. I don't even know why. And I hid it from my parents, like I didn't show them or anything. And then it was a new year, so we went into 2019. I was still 13 years old. My birthday was in April. So I continued doing it, and then I actually moved on from using paper clips to breaking pencil sharpeners and using the razors out of there. And at this point in my life, because I had been getting into so much trouble at school, I had been meeting a lot of people in isolation and stuff who were very bad influences, and a few of them people also suffered with their mental health. So I did learn a lot of things from those people. No hate to them at all, you know, everyone goes through things, but yeah, I gave in to peer pressure a lot basically, and I learned a lot of things. I used to like run away and stuff. I would steal the pencil sharpeners from like the shops, I wouldn't even buy them. It didn't really like get bad until April. So it was either the week before my birthday or the week after my birthday, I can't remember. At that point, we went on holiday. So me and my family and my best friend, we went to Spain. And luckily it was April, so it wasn't that hot in Spain. We thought it would be hot, but it wasn't. So when we got there, we had packed loads of summer clothes, but we didn't actually wear any of them. We all just wore like winter clothes because it was so cold. I remember that whole holiday, I wore like a headband around my wrist, and I like wrapped it around twice, and I wore it on my wrist for the whole holiday because I had some cuts on my arm that like, they weren't bad, but they weren't like fully healed, so they were still a little bit like visible, if you know what I mean. So I wore that on my wrist for the whole holiday, and I just remember the whole holiday, like I couldn't wait to get home and self-harm again. Like, I don't even know why, because I was on holiday, like I was living the life in Spain, and all I could think about was self-harm. And then the day we got home from the holiday, I did self-harm, and I went too far. Well, at the time, I thought I went too far. it was all superficial, but I did a lot of it because I had been like waiting all week, like it was all I thought about. So I did loads on my arm and it went like really red. And I thought, oh my gosh, like it's infected, like my parents are gonna kill me because they don't even know that I do this anymore. So I started having a panic attack and I called my best friend and she only lived around the corner and I asked her if she could meet me and she said yes. So I went to the alleyway by my house and the panic attack was getting worse. And I remember sitting on the floor and a stranger walked past, this really lovely lady, and she was so worried. She asked me if I was okay and I was like, yes, I'm fine. I'm waiting for my friend. But I was like crying my eyes out at this point. And then my friend came and she told me to ring Childline, which is like a helpline for kids. So I did, and I managed to calm down, and I didn't tell my parents. And then after that, I just kept doing it more and more. And then it was the summer, so we had summer holidays. I don't think I did it much that summer holidays. I think when I was out of school, I was a lot happier. Not tons happier, but I was like more myself and I wasn't surrounded by like bad influences and I wasn't, being made to feel like I was naughty or anything when I was out of school. I was just living my life. So it was a lot better for me over the summer. And then when I returned back to school, this is when things got so bad. So I was 14 at this point, and when I went back to school, I was like doing it so much. I had moved on to doing it on my legs and my arms, and like I said earlier, I used to run away. I don't know why. I have a really nice house, and for the most part, my parents are quite nice. So I don't know. I don't know if maybe it's just because I had like friends who were running away and I just kind of wanted to be part of it. But yeah, we would like genuinely encourage each other, or they would encourage. I don't even know. We were just like all very mentally unwell, and we were teenagers. You know what I mean? I ended up in hospital one time. There was 2 times I ended up in hospital. I think they were both in October of 2019. I can't remember which way around it was, but one time I overdosed. So before school, I just remember I left the house really early, like in the middle of the night, and I just walked around the streets of my neighbourhood because my school's really close by, and then I just took some pills in an alleyway, like not loads, like not enough to kill me. I don't even think it was enough to do any damage. And then I went into school and my friend had told the teacher, and then the teacher called my mum, and I didn't want to go with my mum to the hospital, so I so I ran round the streets of my neighbourhood and I like hid from her. And then I just went to the shop and got a pretzel. I sat on a bench and ate my pretzel. I think I had like a cigarette in my pocket. I lit up the cigarette, I was walking around, and then some police officers came up to me and asked me what my name was. Or they asked me like, is this your name? And I was like, yeah. And then they made me get into the police car and they drove me back to my house and I wouldn't get out the car. So they ended up driving me to the hospital and I stayed in the hospital overnight and there was literally nothing wrong with me. Like, I did not take that many pills. I took more than I should have, but not enough to do any damage, you know what I mean? And then shortly after that, or shortly before that, I can't remember, I was in hospital for self-harm. Again, it was superficial. I don't actually know why I went to hospital, but yeah, I was in hospital for self-harm. And they didn't section me or anything like that. I think I stayed on a ward for like one night and then they let me go because, like I say, everything I was doing was completely superficial. I was just doing a lot of it, you know what I mean? So there was loads, but they weren't actually like bad enough to do any damage. And shortly after that, my parents decided to pull me out of that school, and I kind of stopped. Like I stopped self-harming. I wasn't cured. Like I still suffered with my mental health, but when I was out of that environment, it was easier for me. And then I went to a mental health school. Those actually exist, by the way, I didn't even realise. But they sent me to a school for kids with mental health issues. So I went there for a while. I went there for about a month and then COVID hit. So this was the start of 2020. And then I just dropped out. 2020 was the best year of my life. I was so happy. I was clean from self-harm. I didn't have any panic attacks. I had friends. The weather was so nice. It was amazing. That was the last year that I truly felt like myself. I haven't felt like myself since. And yeah, I loved that year. It was amazing. And then I didn't self-harm again until 2022 when I had started suffering with all sorts of different issues. I had an eating disorder, agoraphobia. So at the end of 2020, I actually developed agoraphobia. So I still have agoraphobia. I haven't left my house in 4 years. We're currently in 2024. It's been 4 years since I've left my house, which I'm going to do another video on. I can go in the garden, I can go on the drive, but I don't actually go anywhere just because I still get panic attacks. But yeah, in 2022 I relapsed with my self-harm, and this time it was worse because I had moved on from doing superficial to quite deep. I think this was just because around this time I had seen I'd fallen into self-harm Twitter. If you don't know what that is, don't go look it up. It's not worth it. I'll explain, but please do not go look it up. Basically, self-harm Twitter is a side of Twitter, otherwise known as X, where people share pictures of self-harm and they compare. It becomes a competition. It's seen as a good thing, and people tell you how to do it. They give advice. It's not a good place, and I don't know how it's allowed, but I fell victim to that, and I felt like I wasn't doing it deep enough or whatever. So I went deeper and deeper and deeper until I went so deep that I had to call an ambulance and get stitches. Just the paper ones, but still. I mean, all the self-harm that I had done years prior had left no scars whatsoever. You wouldn't have even known that I had self-harmed if you looked at me. But after 2022, I was covered in scars, and I still am. And I just kept self-harming and kept calling ambulances, and I was just covered, and I had keloid scars, which is raised scars, and my scars were purple for months. Because the deeper you go, the longer it takes the scar to heal, basically. So I didn't end up getting clean until the end of 2023. And by that point, I was covered. The damage was done. You know what I mean? And it took a while for the scars to go away. I ended up getting put on antipsychotics, which I spoke about in my previous video. And that's really what stabilised my mood. And although I'm still agoraphobic, I still have OCD. Sometimes I still get panic attacks. I have a pretty stable mood now. So I just don't feel the urge to self-harm anymore. I think I'll be 10 months clean next month. So in a few weeks. Which is good. But that's basically my story with self-harm. Everything is a learning experience, and we learn and we grow from the things that we go through. So now I'm proud of myself for getting through it, and I'm not ashamed of my scars. I happily wear short sleeves. If people want to say stuff, then they can, but it doesn't bother me, I won't say I'm proud of my scars, but I'm not ashamed of them, you know what I mean? They're a part of me, they're a part of my story, and I think that my body is amazing for going through what it's gone through, and I'm still standing, you know what I mean? So, yeah, if you're suffering or you're ashamed or anything like that, honestly, you should be proud of yourself that you've survived and that you've made it this far, because I don't care what anyone says, self-harm is one of the worst addictions there is, and most people won't understand it unless they've gone through it themselves. But I understand, and I want to send love to anyone struggling, because it is one of the hardest things to have to go through. Anyway, that's the end of my video. If you have any questions, just leave me a comment. I check my channel every day, so I'll try and reply quickly. And if you like this video, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more mental health chats. I'm going to try and post a few videos a week talking about different topics and different things I've experienced, and maybe give some advice. But yeah, thank you guys for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.